Now I have my kimono laid out, and I have sewn the 3 pieces together that I showed you before. This is the front section, so these are the front 2 pieces, and I have my pattern piece laid out here. And now what I'm going to do is go through and actually mark my sizes. So you shouldn't have cut out your size specifically. Your piece should still look like this, because these leftover fabric sections in the selvages are actually going to be used in the design. So that's just how the traditional kimono is sewn. So you should still have all sizes like this. So go through now and mark your lines, or just the dots if you're a more skilled seamstress, so that you have the general sizing line for your front piece. And you're going to do that on both sides here, but don't cut anything away, just mark where the lines are. Because I'm using the size large and I'm making this for a male, I'm actually not going to mark mine because I only need about 5/8 here, so I don't need to make all these markings. The other thing you need to do, because it's very important for later, is mark your neckline. So I actually cut through this so that I could mark my seam here, because whenever you sew this later, you're going to have to sew the neckline on this stitching line. So I am going to make a little dot right here because I know that I just need to do a regular 5/8 seam here, but on the neck here it's going to be different. So I'm going to go ahead and just trace this with chalk. So do that now. This is now my back piece, and I am doing the same thing for the back piece. So you'll go through and you'll mark whatever size seam line that you're going to need, and then also here at the neck I've cut open sections again so that I can mark out this line that I am going to have to stitch on later. Now on this, I just wanted to show you the difference in sizes. So because my seams match up, because I'm doing the size large, this is what my piece E looks like whenever it is attached to my piece A. So if you are doing, for example, a women's size small, yours might look more like this. And that is right and accurate, and don't worry if that's what you're seeing, because the piece E has a normal selvage and the other one actually has your sizing. So either one of these is correct depending on what size that you are sewing. And then you're just going to pin those together and then stitch them. So now I'm going to stitch those 2 pieces together, the piece E to the piece front A. And like I said, my seams are easy to stitch because I'm doing the size large for a man, but if yours are one of the other sizes, you'll just want to stitch on whatever the line is that you wrote out already with your chalk. So I'm just going to start stitching this down. Also, as a friendly reminder, guys, these pieces are very large, so it never hurts before you start sewing a new section to make sure that your bobbin is okay. I checked my bobbin before I started videoing this section, and it did need to be refilled. If you can just keep moving the back piece so it doesn't get too crowded, that's usually a good idea too. this is where my piece starts to taper off. So this is piece E, this is piece A. I'm just going to keep stitching this until there's nothing else left here to stitch together. And then back stitch. Okay. I'm going to do my other piece. Oh, I can hear it. Here we are. And a good rule of thumb is to always start at the bottom. So always start at your hem. That way your hemline is even. Besides the top piece, you're going to be trimming eventually anyways. Check your bobbin, make sure you're okay. Don't overcrowd yourself. Now I'm going to start tapering off here. Because I'm stitching from the bottom, I have to watch to see where that is. I think a little bit more. Sometimes if you just hold where your seams end, you can feel where it stops. Back stitch it and then you're done with that part. So I'm going to go to my hot iron now and I'm going to press open all of my seams throughout the entire kimono. This is my piece C on the ironing board. Part of the instructions, they want you to turn the seam allowance in 1/2 inch. So I have taken my tape measure here and I've measured 1/2 inch, and then I've also pinned it just to make it easier for me. And then I'm just going to take my iron, and I'm using the cotton setting because mine is in cotton, and I'm just going to press these down. And you're supposed to do that for the top and the bottom part. So this is the top of C, this is the bottom. So you're also going to turn this in 1/2 inch and press that as well. Once you've pressed this bottom piece and the top here, just set that aside for later. Just to show you really quickly, this is what it looks like once it's pressed. So the top is pressed and the bottom is pressed. Just set that aside. Now this is the front, and it has that piece E stitched to it, and I have pressed it open, and then after I pressed it open I also took that seam and pressed it that way. So your piece E, this is now where you're going to be doing your trimming for your sizes. So whereas before it was easier for me because I was doing a size large for a male, I now have to actually cut something. So if you are doing the size small for the woman, you don't actually have to trim much of this at all. But for the male one, I'm going to have to go in here and trim out this extra fabric here according to this line. So if you need to trim things, this is the time to do it. Once your piece is trimmed, you should have a nice clean line like this. That's for the women and the men's. So even whenever I did my small version of a kimono for women, I still trimmed this up here so that I had a straight line. But that is what it looks like when it's done. The next thing that you'll need to do is actually fold over piece E because you're going to be finishing that seam. So this is piece E, which is the piece that we just trimmed, and you're going to be doing 1/4 and then another fourth. So I'm going to fold this over 1/4, and I'm measuring from here just because it's hard to get 1/4 on this little metal bit here. I'm going to press this like that, and then once I've pressed that throughout both of piece E, I'm going to turn that in and press it again. So do that for both front pieces on piece E. Okay, so this is my piece E. Now you can either stitch this by hand or you can do it on the machine. I have to get mine done in 2 days, so I'm doing mine on the machine. And I'm not putting any pins in because I find that usually if I put pins into something that's just very little width like this and then I stitch over it, it tends to just make my stitch look messy. So I'm not pinning mine, but if you feel more comfortable pinning yours, go right ahead. This is my 1/4, and I've also pressed it to give me the extra 1/4, so the fabric pretty much stays like that on its own. And I like a nice top stitch, so I am actually going to stitch mine like this. And while I'm stitching this, I'm just going to be constantly filling beneath to make sure that that fold is where it's supposed to be. And I'm just going to line my fabric up right with my foot here. I should say too, the fabric piece that you're working with is getting quite heavy now, so make sure that your fabric isn't getting pulled in any direction from the weight of the extra fabric. Not to let your piece get overcrowded. So that's very nice and pretty now. Looks good on both sides. And we can move on to the next step. And just as a friendly reminder, continue to check that bobbin. My bobbin is already looking like it may need filled a second time, so keep watching your bobbin.